In this video, I'm going to go through and demonstrate the user interface controls that can be found on the BT library Polaris. This particular video is going to focus on the standard interface. Starting in the top left corner of the plugin, we have the LED light, which is an indication whether our samples are still loading. This should be solid green before you hit play. To the right of this is the CPU meter, which is an indication of how hard the processor on our machine is working. To the right of this is the disk meter, which is going to show us how hard the disk we are streaming the sample content from is working. Following on from this, we have the memory meter, which is an indication of how much sample content is preloaded into the RAM of our machine. The voices meter shows us how many audio threads we're currently streaming at any one point in time. The refresh icon should be clicked when you have things like sticking MIDI notes, and this can be right-clicked for further options. To the right of the refresh icon is the mode switching option, which is where we can choose between the standard interface view and the synth view. Moving on is the MIDI channel option, which is where we can set the incoming MIDI channel for the plugin. We then have a fine tune and also a fine pan control, followed by the master volume. At the end of the top menu, we have the two settings pages. More detail about the settings can be found in the user manual. Below the settings option, we have the expand and collapse option. And to the left of this, we can save a user preset or cycle through the presets available to us. Using the drop-down arrow in the left of the preset bar, we can show even more options. On the left-hand side is the filter section, which is where we can filter the different type of sound we wish to see. On the preset menu itself, we can favorite a sound, which will then show up in the starred filter. We can preview a sound. By hovering over the eye on the right-hand side, we can also display more information about that particular preset. Load a preset by double-clicking or selecting and clicking the load option in the bottom right-hand corner of the preset menu. In the middle of the interface, we have the main controls. The fader on the left is expression. Expression is a volume control that operates within the master volume of the library. In the middle, the fader is for dynamics. Changing this over time will allow us to go from a much softer sound to a much harder sound, and the timbre will also change with it. The control on the right is by default reverb. By clicking this, we can then choose different options. Below the main controls, we have the view selector, which is where we can see different views for the bottom of the interface. The technique view allows us to change the articulation. On the right-hand side is where we set the switching method type. By default, this trigger method is key switch, but from the drop-down menu, we can choose whether this is via CC range, velocity range, via MIDI channel, speed of how fast we play the keys, or also a program change. Below the trigger type is the key switching option, and this is going to allow us to set the parameters for the trigger method. So for example, if I change the trigger method to be program change, the program change value becomes available below. For generic key switching, we can choose whether the method is a normal method, where it simply goes between each individual key, or whether it is latched, which is where the articulation will temporarily change to the one selected and then revert back to the original. For short articulations, we have the round robins. These can be reset via your transport each time you hit play in your DAW, or you can choose via a key switch which round robin is active. And you can also thicken the sound by layering the round robins, or you could add more round robins by borrowing them from a neighboring zone. The transpose option allows you to shift the range of the keyboard around. In the top right-hand corner of the technique view, we have the key switching shimmier, which allows us to slide the default key range around, and we can also lock the technique editor in place. Moving through the views, we then have the signal mixer. In the top left-hand corner of the signal mixer, we can choose to save a preset, load a mix preset, or refresh the mix window altogether back to its default. The global option, when turned on, means that the microphone mix that you set is consistent for all articulations. When you turn this off, you can set individual signal mixes for different articulations. The fader allows us to control the level of that particular signal. And then we have an on-off toggle at the bottom. We can cycle through the signals at the bottom using these two arrows. And then on the right-hand side, we have a stereo width and pan control, which allows us to modify the stereo width and panning for the close signals. We also have a left and right reverse. Once more, moving through the views, we have the effects view, which shows us all particular effects that are available to us for that particular preset you have selected. The noise effects is a volume control which introduces noise to the signal, and from the drop-down menu below, we can select that type of noise we want. The attack option, when available to us, allows us to set a time for how long it takes the sound to fade in. The release option allows us to extend the ends of the notes or also shorten them. The tightness control, when available to us, is different to the attack, and that will eat into the start of the sample. The variation control sets a different loop point in the sample, which means each time you change the variation control, you'll get a different phrasing of that particular sample. The vibrato control allows the user to increase the level of vibrato heard on an articulation or completely remove it. The reverb control is a level of how much reverberation is added, and again below this we have the different impulse responses that we can use. And finally, the view on the right is for the grain delay. Now, a grain delay is very different to a normal echo. Grain delay allows the user to take the direct sound, so the dry sound, and sample a portion of it. And that portion of the sampled dry sound is known as a grain. And each individual control in this particular interface modulates the sound within that grain. So starting with the control in the top left corner, we have the delay time. Now this is going to allow the user to set how long it takes for that sampled audio to be created. So if I change the mix in the bottom right hand corner to be 100%, which means we're only going to hear the grain delay, and I make this 3 seconds, and I press down a key now, it takes 3 seconds for that delay to be heard. Now, if I change the delay spread, this allows the user to set a random distribution of those delay times, so things occur more quickly or more slowly. The duration allows us to set the size of the overall grain, so how big the sample size is that we're delaying. So if I change the duration to be really, really small, we'll hear an almost static-like sound because the portion of the audio we are sampling is very, very small. And if I increase this, we'll hear much more of the direct sound. Now, the duration spread, similar to the delay spread, allows us to set a randomization to that duration control. The frequency control allows the user to set how often new grains are created. And the next control, the frequency spread, allows the user to set how random new grains are created. The reverb control allows us to apply a overall reverb to this particular effect. And then we have in the bottom left-hand corner the tuning option. Increase the tuning to be really quite high. It will be very different to the original sound in its pitch. Likewise to the frequency spread and the duration spread, the tuning spread allows us to set how random this tuning control is. So if I increase the tuning spread, we'll hear a lot more variation in pitch from high pitches to low pitches. Following on from this, we have the tuning quantize option, which is going to allow the user to set the scale in which this tuning behaves at. So if I was to change this particular thing down to, say, a minor third, the pitches will operate within a minor third. Moving on, we have the filters, which are generic high-pass and low-pass filters for the grains. And then we have the filter spread, which, again, offers a randomization control to those filters. The overall mix control allows the user to set how much of this direct sound versus the sampled grains is heard. If you have any further questions, please do reach out to us at spitfireaudio.com/support.
Thanks for watching Spitfire Clips. Let us know if it was too long, too short, too fast, or too slow in the comments down below. Hit like if we answered your question, and subscribe for more clips, tips, tricks, and exclusive Spitfire content.